My name is Alice Wilkinson. I work with Watson, and I see some friendly faces out there this morning. I appreciate that. And I'm very happy to see as many people who are here this morning, seeing that it's 10 a.m. on Friday morning in Vegas, so I appreciate that as well. And there really are a couple of things that I wanted to cover here today, and hopefully I'm normally used to giving presentations in kind of a smaller environment than this, so I normally do a lot of interaction with everybody. But if you do have questions, I'm happy to answer them as we go through the presentation. I'm also happy to answer them at the end, so we'll make that work. But everybody has choices to make every day. So if we go and we're here in Vegas, last night you guys all chose to go out to dinner last night, right? So I'm going to pick on you, Bill, because you're a friendly face and you're right in front. So where did you choose to go to dinner?
I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's with a Z. Isn't that awful?
But it was good, right?
It was very good.
And then did you get to choose, or?
Mary actually gave me a little list, and so
Okay.
between the two of us, we chose.
Oh.
She shortened the list, and then I.
But you did a little bit of research and you made a choice about where you wanted.
She actually gave me links to each, and I did a little research.
Okay, so you did a little research, and this is normally how we make our choices in business too. Thankfully, in Vegas, you got a pretty good chance of getting a good meal, and the consequences are pretty slim too. You know, the worst thing you're going to have is a bad meal in Vegas, so it's not the end of the world. But when it comes to choosing premixes and premix suppliers, there's a lot more that goes into it than maybe people understand. So that's what I'm here to cover with you today. First off, where would you want to use a premix versus individual ingredients, and then secondarily, if you do decide to go the route of a premix, what are the questions that you need to ask so that you can put together a premix that really will work for you? So when it comes to using a premix, your other alternative is really using individual ingredients. And there's a lot of different choices out there. So you've got a lot of different choices of source, and how familiar you really are with them. When we start thinking about it, start with how much space do they take up. If you think about something like a calcium product, calcium on its own takes up a lot of space. The 100% for the daily value is a whole gram. So when we're talking about putting it into a food product or a dietary supplement, it takes up a lot of our room. And then what are the sources that are available for it? Are we going to use a soluble source? They tend to have less activity to them than something that's insoluble. But even on an insoluble, like a dicalcium phosphate, it's only 29% calcium. So then you have to take all that into consideration. So how are we going to choose those sources up front? So how familiar are you with those individual ingredients is very important. So the molecular potencies becomes an issue with them as well. The more soluble sources tend to take up even more space. Then what's going to look or taste good in your product? Is flavor really an issue? Are you going to do a directly compressible tablet that's going to have a coating on it? Maybe the flavor of it's not that important. But if you're going to do a ready-to-drink or a gummy formulation, the taste becomes really key. So how's it going to look in that formulation? What's it going to taste like? And then, are they stable ingredients or are they not stable ingredients? And how do they interact together? And if they're not very stable, what kind of overages are we going to be looking at? So your familiarity with all these things might help you decide whether you want some help in that piece of it, or those individual ingredients you know on your own well enough that you're very confident in putting them together. When you do put different ingredients together, it's more than just one, how are those two going to interact? Are we going to put two together that are going to have an issue together, or are they going to function well in each other's presence? And then do you know all the different options that are available to you as well? Things like B12. Well, it's available as a spray-dried product. It's available as a triturated product. It's available in pure crystal. Or something like vitamin A. Do you want to use a vitamin A oil? Do you want to use a powder? What are the types of potencies that you're looking for? What are the different sources? And do you really understand all those pieces behind it so that you can put together the best combination for the product that you're working in? So do you want to use a premix? I'll make sure I'm going, yep. So premixes come together as a single ingredient. It's one specific new ingredient together. And you have a lot of different documentation that comes with that. So do you want to do that on all the individual raw materials, or do you want to do that on one single raw material? So if you look at numbers that go into a premix, sometimes you're looking at 2 or 3 ingredients on a simple vitamin like A, C, and E mix, versus something that could go up to 22, 23, or 30 different ingredients in it, depending on what you're putting together on your label. So all that required supplier documentation is the same either way. So I'm sure that in all of our businesses, we're all familiar with what the type of documentation is required now. From your own internal standpoint, everybody has a different set of supplier documentation that you're requiring on each new individual ingredient. Are these ingredients that you're already using? If that's the case, you might have a little bit easier time of it. But if these are ingredients that you're not familiar with, then maybe it's easier for you to supply or approve one individual ingredient where it's all coming together as one component. So all that documentation doesn't change whether it's 1 or it's 20. So then the approval of that supplier as well. So that whether you want to approve, 20 different suppliers, because most of these ingredients don't come from bulk areas. They're all made individually as individual components. Or do you want to approve one supplier and then leave it into the hands of your premix producer to get you all those different approvals for you? And then the required internal documentation for you as well. Do you have to run it through a HACCP team if you're food-based, or do you have to run it through risk analysis if you're not? Is there anything that you need to do for your NSF certifications or whatever GMP certifications that you're running as well? And then what happens when there is an industry change? When the USP monograph changes, do you have a way of staying on top of that so that you know that lead requirements changed, or there's been a change in the industry that requires that you do something differently? Then there's also the idea of inventory management. So we've gotten multiple different ingredients to inventory. If these are products that you're already using, it might be easy because you already have them on stock. But the volumes of them on some of them are going to be quite different, very much smaller than the bulk components, the larger components, like maybe the macro minerals. So the shelf life of all those ingredients needs to be taken into account too. How long is the shelf life of the smallest component or the least stable of those ingredients? So that you want to make sure that you have all your ingredients fresh, because when you go to use them, that all affects the shelf life of your product as well. Then the incoming testing on all those in different ingredients as well. The dietary supplement industry, you're obliged to minimally do an ID test. So do you want to do ID testing, and how are you going to be doing that on 14 or 20 different ingredients versus one ingredient? And then the scaling and dispensing of those as well. Some of those ingredients are going to be used at very, very low use rates comparatively to the larger minerals, et cetera, in your product. So when you do have those low use ingredients, how do you want to prove homogeneity? So, and I always like to talk about B12 because B12 is one that normally everybody's got a little bit of familiarity with. The daily value for it's only 6 micrograms. So on pure crystal product, that's about 5 particles. So if you want to deliver 10% of the daily value, you have to deliver less than a particle in every serving. And on a tablet basis, that's a pretty difficult thing to do. Even in a liquid beverage product, you might have a difficult time doing that if the product's not entirely soluble when you're putting it together in your packaging. So with B12, one of the best things to do with it is to perform a trituration of it so that you have some homogeneity with it. So triturations can be done in 2 different manners, and they're done differently by different manufacturers. You could just do a blend where you take 100 particles of a carrier and 1% or 0.1% particles of the B12 crystal and mix them up. And if you have some pretty aggressive almost plating of that product, if you're using an aggressive type of mixer, you might get some plating of the B12 directly onto the surface of the particles that you're working with. But it's still not totally homogeneous. When you go and weigh it out, maybe you can weigh, instead of 1 particle, you can weigh 100 or 1,000, and so by power of dilution, you're going to be more homogeneous. But you're still going to have 100 particles of carrier and 1 particle of B12. And it is more homogeneous, but it's not as homogeneous as you can possibly get. So probably the most optimal way to work with that is really to solubilize your B12. And then you solubilize your B12, you spray it onto a carrier, and now every particle contains the same amount of B12 carried on the surface of that product. And that's what we call fluid bed trituration or sprayed trituration. And they're very different. And unless you ask the questions about it, you're likely not to know what went into your premixes or even into your raw materials incoming. It's not something that shows on a specification sheet for a product. Definitely doesn't show on a certificate of analysis for a product. So it really is an understanding how that product was put together ahead of time. So the homogeneity of low-use ingredients becomes very critical when you're using premixes or any of these individual vitamins. So what can the premix offer for you? Hopefully, you'll end up with a lot of formulation expertise coming from the lab that you're working with. You're looking for formulators that have experience in the industry, your industry, as well as other industries. And it's good to have a wide variety available to you. And the big reason for that is sometimes you need to look at things totally differently than what we're all used to. So if you're familiar with producing tablets and you're working with a formulator who has worked mostly in beverage, sometimes they'll look at things differently than you do. And so it's good to have a wide variety of formulation expertise available to you. You want them to have knowledge of label claims. And I know that one of the handouts that we gave to you will actually give you actually the, not the daily values, but the RDIs. And we talk about RDIs versus daily values. RDIs are designed based on individual needs. So a pregnant and lactating woman versus a geriatric man having different vitamin requirements. Those are great, and those are good to understand. But when it comes down to putting it on your product label, it still needs to be variance against daily values, because that's what the FDA requires for us for labels. So you want to have somebody who can help you with that and walk you through the difference between an RDI and a daily value and what's appropriate for your product. You also want them to have the knowledge of those different sources. Where do you want to use a soluble calcium? Where is that calcium phosphate going to give you an issue with your pH? Where are there different sources that are available with different functionalities? So you want your formulation group to be able to help you with that and kind of save you some steps. They also should have knowledge of those interactions, where you don't want to have an unstabilized vitamin A up against a reactive mineral like magnesium oxide. So what can you do to protect one from the other? What's the best way to get the stability of your product by designing the premix in the correct fashion? And then where are the limitations between the marketing and production? Sometimes marketing comes up with these fabulous ideas, and they expect all of us formulators to be able to make that work for them. You do need to be able to bridge that gap, and sometimes, find the solutions that make everybody happy. And hopefully with a good formulation group, they'll help you walk through that. There are certain things that are just not physically possible, but then sometimes there's a different way to go around that and come up with a solution. I had a company once who definitely wanted vitamin C in a baked, crunchy cookie. And, vitamin C is not stable to heat, and we're trying to put it through the oven, and there's ways that you can actually stabilize vitamin C so that it is stable to baking, but it's extremely expensive. And they really had to have it, marketing had to have it, and they finally sent me a product, and it was glazed. So it was very simple for us to fix, but it took us a long time to get to that point. We were able to put all the vitamin C in the glaze, and they were able to get what they wanted. So it's, again, bridging that gap and being able to come up with some out-of-the-box solutions to help your customers and to get what you really need. So sometimes you need a little help with that. And then you want to have some real-life experience, things like the cookie with the vitamin C, that's a good one, or somebody who knows that when your bottling line goes down and you have a large dose of vitamin C in the product, it's going to sit there and scavenge oxygen. And you might not get your label claims that you wanted to at the end of your shelf life because you lost it during production. So somebody who can help you with that ahead of time and say, hey, look, based on the way this line looks, you might really want to invest in a nitrogen blanket because it might help you out further down the line. So that real-life experience can certainly be of value to you as well. And then also knowledge of the regulations. What country you're going to sell it in. If you're not real familiar with it, then maybe a formulation group can help you and steer you in the right directions, where maximums lie, where different sources are needed, so that you can put together the premix that's going to get you there again the first time, hopefully saving you some steps in formulation. Then you have the benefit of that single ingredient. So all that supplier approval documentation, hopefully you can get it down to one set of docs. And that's a little easier to manage, especially in the world that we live in now where there's so much documentation required. So also incoming testing, it can be limited as well because you're looking at one ingredient versus the 10 or 15. The increased homogeneity in regards to using those triturations up front, that helps, but then also the fact that we're blending those 10 or 12 different ingredients together is giving you additional homogeneity so that you can use it as the one component, so you're getting multiple layers of increased homogeneity of your product. And then the premix itself should be also homogeneous on its own. You want to be sure that's not non-segregating powder and that it's not going to settle in shipment or that you're going to have segregation issues from the top of the box to the bottom of the box when you use a premix. The use rates on these are normally pretty low. You had a question?
I'm sort of new to this whole industry. Give me a quick definition of premix, please.
A quick definition? Sure. Premix normally would be if you had, and what type of product do you work in? I'm sorry, sir?
It's all experimental.
All experimental, but a beverage or a bar? Let's just say it's a beverage, okay? So if you had a nutritional panel that you wanted to put on the back and you had your beverage together, let's say that you have a base that you like and it's cherry fizzy soda, and you wanted to put 20% of the daily value for 10 vitamins and minerals in that because that was where you thought your market was going to be for this product. And maybe you had some additional botanicals in it, and maybe there's a dose of caffeine in it as well. It might be easier for you to work with a company who is going to put together all those vitamins and minerals in it based on all the information that you had together on your processing, your shelf life, how long you wanted it to be on the marketplace for, how it was going to be processed, is it going into a can or a glass bottle. We're going to ask you all those questions up front so that we can put together a premix that contains all those vitamins, maybe some of your botanicals, and maybe that caffeine even as well, so that you can focus on making cherry fizzy soda, and then you just have a single ingredient to add to it that would get you the panel that you wanted. Does that help?
Yes, very much.
Excellent. And that's what I'm talking about is, do you want to source the 12 different ingredients to get to that label? or do you want to work with somebody who can help you with that? The inventory management as well. In regards to us being a premix house, Watson is a premix house. So we have most of these ingredients on our floor all the time. So we're in charge of the inventory management at that point. We're doing the first expired, first out rules. We're bringing raw materials in and using them pretty quickly. And because we're bringing them in for multiple customers, we can be using full cartons, full pallets, full truckloads, and hopefully we can share some of the benefit of our buying power with you. And then lastly, they're custom designed. Everything that we do is custom for your product, for your processing parameters. And it has to be, because everybody does something different. You might be making cherry fizzy soda, as might you be making cherry fizzy soda, but his is going in a glass bottle, yours is going in a can, his is going to be refrigerated, yours is going to be shelf stable. And maybe you want yours on the shelf for 2 years, and his is going to have a 6-week shelf life. 2 totally different premixes, even if the panel is identical, because all that's going to be designed to be for your processing conditions. You're going to need significantly less overages than you might need if you're going to be putting it shelf stable. So those types of things need to be taken into account. You don't want to be paying for extra nutrition if you don't need it as well. So hopefully helping that formulation piece. So in choosing your premix supplier, it really is more than just a blend. And it seems like now anybody who has a ribbon blender and the capability of buying some ingredients thinks that they can put together premixes. But there really is some expertise behind it. And it's all about your capabilities and your services. So what ingredients are available to them? Are they really familiar with the components that you want to add? Because if they're not, maybe they're not the right supplier for you as well. Because they need to have the familiarity with it. If they're going to go out and just buy the same ingredients that you could buy on your own, it's maybe not of benefit for you. Do they really know their suppliers? What are their relationships with their suppliers like? It's a lot of these ingredients aren't produced in the United States. They're produced overseas. So what types of relationships do they have? Do they know their suppliers well? What kind of quality systems do they have in place with their suppliers? It becomes very important. The other thing is we're dealing in a marketplace where prices go up and prices go down, and availability is up and down as well. So do they have dual sourcing? Do they have 2 approved suppliers at all times? Because when you're ready to launch your cherry fizzy soda, it better be that the premix is available for you, and it can't be that we're out of market because the Olympics are going on. So it's very important that we have dual sources on these ingredients. And then how quickly do they turn their inventory over as well? That's important too. Does inventory get turned once a year, twice a year, 4 or 5 times a year? More important, if you want fresh product, your premix supplier should also be keeping their stock fresh. And then if it's not something that's in stock or it's not stock for them, that's okay too, because that happens. There's new ingredients coming out every day. I'm sure that if you've been up on the trade floor today or during this show, you've seen new products out there. There's always new things up. So if it's something that's not stock for them, are they familiar with the market? Do they have some purchasing power there? Do they still have the relationships that they know where to go and where to get the quality ingredients from? Becomes more and more important. And then there's a whole level of further processing that comes into this. We talked a little bit about triturations of the B12 specifically, but there's a lot of other things that go along with producing a high-quality premix that can be value added with further processing. There's the trituration. Is it a true trituration versus a blend? Does an ingredient need to be encapsulated? And if it does need to be encapsulated to protect it from the other ingredients, are they doing that themselves, or are they purchasing that product? When you talk about encapsulation, do they have the ability just to spray dry a liquid to a powder? Or do they have the capability of putting a solid coating on something like in a fluid bed processor? And then manipulation of particle size becomes really key as well. Talk about particle size becomes important for actual taste. Does it become sandy or gritty feeling in your mouth? As well as, is it soluble, is it dispersible? A lot of the unsoluble nutrients, still we're looking for dispersibility, which was really important. So that manipulation of particle size becomes key. And if you're dealing with ingredients that have very, very large particle size and then some components that are very, very small in particle size, it goes back to homogeneity. If you're trying to deliver zinc at a microgram level, when you have calcium at 300 milligrams, you really need to be sure that every single dose is identical. So manipulation of particle size so that we have homogeneity of the premix becomes super key. So what capabilities does the premix supplier have? Can they control that for you, or do they have to go out of house for anything like that? Or do they not even understand it and not understand how those things need to be controlled? They also need to be problem solvers for you. Some of the best relationships are out there is when a customer has a problem. They have a problem, they need to solve it. Hey, I tried to do this, but it turned green. What can you do to help me? And a lot of the science that we do is not maybe as research and development as we'd like it to be. Some of it's just very dirty bucket science, but it tends to get to the point, and you can solve a lot of problems like that. Does it look good? Does it taste good? Did it interact? What can we do to correct that, to make it a more powerful premix for you? So you really need to have a problem solver in your back pocket as well. And then all blenders are not the same. So what equipment's available to them? Do they just have a couple of Rebin blenders? What about the different sizes? Do they have sizes that are very small so that the laboratory 1 kilo batch that you're going to be testing on your bench, is that going to be really scalable to when you're ordering 6,000 or 7,000 pounds at a clip? You need to know what their capabilities are that way. And then different blenders do different things very well. So is it a situation where they only have product that has, or blenders that have intensifier bars installed and they can't not use them? Some products are very, very sensitive to an intensifier bar. If it's encapsulated, you did an awful lot of work to make sure that you had an ingredient fully covered. And now you use an intensifier bar on it, and you shear all of that right back off again. So it was a waste of money, a waste of your time. So using the correct blender for that premix is very critical. And then making sure that you don't segregate it on the way back out. Was it a segregating powder? It needs to be controlled very well so that every dose that you use is uniform. Lot sizing becomes important as well, because we talked about some of that finished good paperwork that we need to do. Everything needs to come with a certificate of analysis. We're talking about active components for you, right? They're going to go on your daily panels. So in that aspect, we really need to be sure that we have lot sizing that's controlled for your sizes as well, because all that testing is done on a per lot basis. So if they've got a blender that can do 200 pounds and you're ordering 10,000 pounds at a clip, that's an awful lot of lot testing to be done. If you need 10,000 pounds and you can get it in 2 lots instead, that makes it easier for you to QC test on your end when it's incoming, as well as for the company to provide it to you with the correct C of A's outgoing. So lot sizing becomes more important as well. And then in regards to premix design, do you have that formulation lab experience? Are they giving you the knowledge of the products that you require, the processes, your regulations? And then we talk about blend and pre-blend design. Now, on your product with your cherry fizzy soda again, if you had 12 ingredients in there, and some of them are macro minerals, large components that take up a lot of space, and some of them are still, even that B12, even if it's a 1% trituration, it might be less than 0.5% of the premix formulation. So what's the best way to deliver that? So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll take all those small components, we'll blend them together once first, and we'll assay all of them. And then we'll take that as a subcomponent and we'll put it into the main blend with all your macro minerals. And that includes, increases the homogeneity of the blend outgoing to you. So it becomes more important. So does your supplier understand that? Do they know where it's important to do a pre-blend and then a main blend on a premix so that you can get homogeneity of your product? Then we talk about quality systems. Quality systems really need to be aligned with what your quality systems are. You don't want somebody who does way more testing than is important to you, because there's a lot of costs associated with that. But you also don't want a company that does no testing when testing is important to you. So you need to have something where you have a good alignment between the two companies. So on your raw materials, who are their suppliers? How do they do their approvals? What are their incoming testing? Is it similar to yours? And then what are their quality systems in their plant as well? And I don't know how many of you are food manufacturers versus dietary supplement manufacturers or some hybrid of in between. But on the food side, we talk about our food GMPs, your CFR Part 110, where GFSI is really being driven for our quality system. So you can look, is somebody GFSI certified? Do they have a BRC audit or an SQF audit, which is basically being driven by who can sell what into Walmart. And that's kind of helped standardize what some of the quality levels are on the food side. It all requires that they have not HACCP certification, but HACCP plans anyway. And normally they have to do a risk analysis of their processes as well. So there's some value to that. Even if you're a supplement producer, there's some value to the food regulations as well. That definitely helps reduce risk on a supplement side. So a HACCP plan, control of their allergens. Allergens can be a big risk if you're working with a plant that has allergens in their plant as well. Their controls for foreign materials become more important. Versus the dietary supplement regs, they have a lot of incoming raw material testing, and they do a lot of finished good testing as well. There are different audits that they provide as well, like an NSF certification. And the new dietary supplement GMPs, have they been audited yet by the FDA? Many have not yet. Some suppliers also just say, well, the dietary supplement regs are really specifically written for finished dose form, but if you're an ingredient supplier to the dietary supplement market, you really should be obliged to follow the same regulations. So knowing what their standpoint is on their quality systems becomes important. And then what's their quality approach? You're going to be working with their QA team as well. So do they know the regulations? Do they have the appropriate staff? And is that staff independent of the production staff as well? And that's very important because it's in any business, you have production, you have quality. They really do need to report up through different lines of business so that there's no favoritism one way or the other. And then they also need to audit more than just critical control points. Critical control points have gotten a lot of press in regards to HACCP, but they are not the only piece of quality on the production floor. So you want the QA team out there on the floor actually auditing what the products are that are being made for you. And then what kind of outgoing testing are they going to be able to do for you? Do they have a QC lab in-house, or are they using a third party? If they're using a third party, how have they certified that third party testing for them? So what tests are they doing themselves? What tests go out of house? Then which types of methods are they using? Are they qualified methods? Are they appropriate for the premix itself? And then are they able to share those methods with you? Because lots of methods are adjusted. They're adjusted because we've done some sort of encapsulation. We've done some sort of specialty mixing of a product so it's more stable. So the standard AOAC methods typically are not appropriate. There's different extraction methods that need to be done, et cetera, so that we can make sure that the assays are accurate. Are they willing to share those methods with you? Did they validate them? Are they there as an assistant for you as well? When you go to send your product out, can you use their QC lab to help you with your own lab so that you can come up with the accurate assays that you need? Do they do testing on in-process product as well as finished product? So at Watson, B12 is a very good example. B12 crystal comes in our door. We do an ID test on it. We do, on a regular basis, we'll do a full monograph test on the crystal as well. Then we're actually going to make a fluid bed trituration with the product. Fluid bed trituration is normally very small batches, up to 1,000 pounds. Every single one of those batches that we make, we're going to do an assay on for B12 content as well as other things. We then take all those sub-batches and we do a blend of that again, and we do the assay again. And then if we're going to go and put it into a multi-component premix, there'll be a pre-blend and a main blend where it'll be assayed once or twice more. So by the time you get that premix that has that B12 as its component, it's apt to have 4, 5, or 6 analyses on it to be sure that it's the right level and dosing for you. So it's not all just about finished good testing. How much testing is done on that WIP product too, that in-process product? It becomes more and more important. So product quality, again, in regards to appropriate testing. Are they testing the active components, or are they doing C of A's by audit or by calculation? What physical parameters are getting done as well? Are they testing things like bulk density for you if it's important to you? If you're making a tableted product, bulk density is probably pretty important. Flow can be pretty important. Particle size can be important. What's the moisture content of that product? All those things come into play. Are they able and willing to do that for you? And then what additional requirements are we looking for now? If you're doing a cold process product, my guess is you're going to have a micro requirement, as you should. If there's no heat kill step in your processing, you probably want micro test on our product going out. And then what types of heavy metals are we looking at now? Heavy metals have become all the rage. Dietary supplement elemental contamination came out in the USP, and so everybody's looking now at the elemental contamination that you can have. So is that testing being done? Is it being done just pass-fail, or are they actually giving you values? And that becomes more important as well. Are there other contaminants we need to look at? Is this product originally produced with a solvent extraction? Do we need to be looking for residual solvents, et cetera? So on a C of A, are you looking at data that's an audit versus calculation, or a calculation of just inclusion, or do you actually have data? And that's a very good question to ask, because sometimes a C of A can look like it has real data on it, because the numbers are rounded out to they don't all say pass-fail, they're out to 6 decimal places, but it can still be done via calculation. So looking at the raw material incoming, and then just calculating out based on percentage of formulation and giving you a C of A on the outgoing. Is that really what you need? Because that doesn't count if there was a production error with the product. So really, a certificate of analysis should have data for every last product, every last lot, all the active components, unless it's something that you've permanently agreed on or ahead of time agreed on that there's really no appropriate assay for it. Something like an unstandardized green tea or an unstandardized botanical. Maybe it's okay to do that by inclusion because that's what's going to work for everybody. But you need to agree on that ahead of time. And then is that data actually reviewed? There should be a signature at the bottom of the C of A, and every piece of data should be reviewed by additional analysts before it goes on to that certificate of analysis. Then where are the methods? Are the methods, are they appropriate? Are they modified as they should be? Were they validated methods that they used? And you should be able to ask these questions. They should be able to answer for you. Are they going to be able to share those methods with you? And can you agree on them ahead of time? Can everybody say, yes, we're going to do this testing via ICP. Everybody's good with heavy metal testing via ICP. Yes, let's agree to that before we start sending you product and find out that we're all using different methods and it's not really what everybody needed. And then the whole quality approach. You should have a QC team. Again, that is the appropriately trained team. They should be able to do proficiency testing. If you're doing your own testing in-house, they should be able to do P-testing with you so that you can rely on their data. That would allow you to release off of the C of A data versus having to repeat it all yourself. They should be a resource to you as well as a resource to your third-party lab. If you have a third-party lab validating their data annually, then they should be able to help that third-party lab with the assays. So make sure you have that as a resource. And then what additional resources or additional services are available to you from that premix supplier? It's a custom product. Is it just in time? It normally means just in time lead times. So if it's something that you need to have stocked ahead of time so that there's always one order on the floor, make sure that they're capable of doing that for you. What kind of custom packaging do you require? Do you need to have additional lot numbers, et cetera, located on your actual labels for the way out the door? Do you want to have it prepackaged so that you always use 42.8 pounds per batch, and you want to have it prepackaged for you so you don't have to scale it? Are they capable of doing that for you? Do you have direct access to the people that you need? It's always good to have one contact to go to, but it's always also good to have contacts in the R&D department or in the quality department so you can talk to who you need to when you need to. And then how do they get your documents to you? Everybody needs them now. It could be, 6 pages or 36 pages, but you need to have your documentation ahead of time. Are they a resource for you, or does it go into a black hole and you never get your documents back? So if you need to have your documents, make sure that you've got a contact there as well. So when it comes to choosing your premix supplier, the value of a long-term relationship is really high. You can have very good teaming between the customer service teams, and your R&D teams, your different quality teams. They'll get to know each other, and they'll be able to help you through your issues as well as their own. The ability and openness to help each other, to see different problems and to come up with creative solutions for them. That sharing of information is very, very valuable, and when you know each other well and you have a long-term relationship, you could do that. And then you want to have access to all of those different resources so that you can trust each other, and that's implicitly important as well. If there's anything that we could answer questions for you, I'd be happy to. We're actually located in West Haven, Connecticut. And anybody who wants copies of the slides, I'm sure if you drop your business cards off on the way out, we can send you all a copy of the slides as well, if that helps. Or you want my business card. Our booth number is 28035, and I'm here till the end of the show as well, so I don't normally get to leave the booth too much, so if you want to stop by, you can. Yeah, anybody else have other questions? Sure, please. We've done that in the past, yes. Now, we are not in the business of doing clinical trials ourselves. We normally partner with our customers when they're working on clinical trials. But the important thing about clinical is when you are actually going to get to that level, you want commercially produced product. There's a lot that we can do on a test level where we can get you in multiple different samples so that you can do your bucket chemistry. Does it look good? Does it taste good? But when it comes down to being ready to do the clinical, you want commercially produced product so that it's exactly what you would be using when you moved ahead, and you definitely want that full C of A. So, but we have done that in the past. Nobody else, huh? This is Al Vega, who works with me at Watson, so you better be asking a nice question. Yes, they are.
Not going to get some colleagues in academia, so they will work with issues like UCLA, for example, for them to dictate the profile of the product.
Mhm.
They're great scientists in terms of teaching, but they're not scientists in terms of understanding the reaction of the ingredients, how they react. Sometimes they will advise the customer to a specific profile that is very difficult to develop for the technique and the research.
Yeah.
What's your opinion for those kind of customers? And what would you say to a customer comes to you and says, I'm working with a professor today, is the criteria that they want us to
Yeah. And so Al's question specifically was, when academia gets involved, sometimes there's a lot of clinical data out there that shows one piece or another, and that may or may not translate to a practical product on the marketplace. So how do you work through that? And again, it goes back on relationships. Can you rely together? You know, somebody who's trying to use a illogical source of a vitamin to get vitamin activity biologically. There's things that come up on the internet. We see them every day, all the time, and it's good to be able to have somebody to work through that with. And again, it goes back to trust. You know, where are things appropriate, where aren't they? And normally there's a compromise that can be made in regards to putting together a premix that will function and still meet most of marketing's, or in this case, academia's goals. So it's a matter of compromise and knowing exactly what physically will work and what won't. Anyone else? Yes, Tian.
Okay, you mentioned that your reporting of premix is very important. Supposedly you have more than 5 different active ingredients in the premix,
Mm-hmm.
and they have quite different product size,
Yes.
quite different density, like the mineral, mix the mineral with the metals.
Mm-hmm.
The density, product density are quite different. So they will segregate how,
They can.
yes. So how can you prevent this?
Okay. It depends on the nature of the premix itself. If there are fat-soluble vitamins in there that have been spray dried, typically there's enough surface oil in there to keep the powders from being segregating powders. Typically, not always the case. If that's not the case, then sometimes you need to work on particle manipulation. Like we've had customers who have very heavy salt blends, you know, lots of potassium chloride, sodium chloride, things like that, very large granules, trying to deliver very, very small levels of very, very fine ingredients, in which case you need to particle manipulate the particles of salt so that you can get their particle size down small enough so that you can keep that premix homogeneous. So that's where it becomes important to know who you're working with and know what their capabilities are. If you've got a component that's got a very large difference in particle size and it is a segregating powder, something needs to be done to control it. So it's a matter of knowing what that, and being able to determine, you know, is this product really going to segregate on us or not? And then you might have to back it up with the different homogeneity tests. You know, do you want to do a homogeneity study right off the bat? You know, pull 20 or 30 different samples from the blender so that we know that every different spot in the blender is uniform. And do blending studies where, you know, you pull samples at 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to be sure that you have the right blend times as well. Did that help you answer?
Yeah, what's the kind of method you usually use to detect the blending your problem?
What kind of methods do we use to detect
Yeah, blending your problem.
a brand?
For example, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, how can you determine?
Typically, you know, Watson's been in this business for 75 years now. So we have some pretty good standbys that we work off of. You know, our history with products that are similar normally can get us into the range where we need to be. A lot of it will be based on bulk density and the fill rates on the blenders that we're using, and then normally the appropriate times for both of those components. But scale up becomes important. So a lot of it's based on history and how we know different products will interact. And then again, which blender we're going to put it in. Do we have any other questions? You got another one for me? That's great.
If I was to consider my blend of whatever to be fairly proprietary,
Mm-hmm.
do I need to have it patented first in order to protect it, or?
To protect it from working with a Premix supplier?
Yes.
Typically, I have had some companies come to me with patents in hand. Most of the time, we can solve that with an NDA And we do a non-disclosure agreement, a two-way to protect both parties involved, and then your information is kept just for you. And a lot of, all of our customers are like that. They all have their own proprietary piece of it. Even if it's not a specific proprietary blend per se, there's always some piece of the magic that you put into it that's really theirs. And so it is important that you don't share that information. And being the premix supplier, again, it goes back to trust. You don't want to use somebody that you don't know who doesn't have a good reputation, because you want to be able to trust that your formulas are safe. So. Anyone else? Thank you for all showing up so early on a Friday morning. I appreciate it.